Hello, good morning. This is Playbook's managing editor and author Jack Blanchard. It is Wednesday, March the 5th, and of course, what is driving the day today is the reaction to President Donald Trump's joint address to Congress from last night. I'm sure you were watching it over the course of about an hour and 42 minutes. I think that's just about the longest one of these we've ever heard. Donald Trump covered a lot of territory, making it, pretty much the longest joint address to Congress we've ever heard. Let's dive into it right now. Joining me to talk about this, I've got Chief Playbook correspondent Eugene Daniels and our Capitol Bureau Chief and senior Washington columnist Rachael Bade. Hello, guys. Good morning. Thanks for joining.
Yes. I'm happy to be here.
A lot to digest
Exactly.
today.
Seriously, let's just give me like a very quick hot idea from the very top. Rachael, what is your one quick takeaway from the whole thing we saw last night?
My primary takeaway was that Democrats stole the show, but not necessarily in a good way for the party. Look, I think there's a reason that Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries told his members yesterday to be on their best behavior, not to be protesting, not to draw attention away. And they didn't listen. They made themselves the story. They heckled. They had signs. They walked out.
They got thrown out.
Yeah, Congressman Al Green literally would refuse to sit down and had to be escorted out by the sergeant at arms. And it's interesting because as one White House official told our colleague Dasha Burns last night, they looked like petulant children. And that became the story instead of what Donald Trump was talking about. And he was really leaning into some controversial things, right? So if they let him sort of stay in the spotlight, it perhaps could have been better for them. But look, the base is angry. They want to see people reacting to Donald Trump. And so, Democrats sort of did what the base wanted.
Is that right, Eugene? Would it have been better for Democrats to sit on their hands or maybe clap along, or did they get it right?
I mean, not if they want to take back the House, right? I think like Rachel's right. The base of the party is pissed off and they want to see people be pissed off. It doesn't help grow the party, right? It doesn't help fix some of the issues that they had in 2024, right? Where you started to see Black voters, brown voters, voters who would typically vote for Democrats voting for Donald Trump. It doesn't fix that problem, but does it make them look tough? And finally, Democratic voters are going to see people doing something, anything in his face. Many of the Democratic voters I talked to over the last week or so running into this were like, we don't want them to go at all, right? So they protested. A lot of this stuff is all theater, including the entire like stand up, sit down, whether or not you're going to do it. But for me, I think the things that actually may not break through, but are probably the most important, was how much time Donald Trump spent talking about tariffs, because that is actually going to impact people's lives, right? The Democrats were smart. They lean in on that in some way, shape, or form. He basically told farmers that, like, bear with me, it's going to hurt for a little bit at some point. And, that is something that you could turn around on him. And also saying that Elon Musk is running Doge, which they just said he wasn't. And so now, people should look on the website. Our great legal team has been looking into this. There's going to be some legal implications of what he said on that, whether or not he is actually in charge, or who the woman that they said was running Doge and administering Doge is actually that. So those kinds of things are things that are going to have ripple effects that like actually matter, that are more than political.
It's fascinating to me that, we listened to an hour and 42 minutes of Donald Trump, and the first thing that we're all talking about in the end is the Democrats in the crowd. And is that because really, it certainly struck me, this was just a classic Donald Trump speech, right? We've watched loads of these. He goes around the houses, his great achievements, his terrible enemies, like the most wonderful things ever. It felt like a campaign rally speech that I'd seen lots of times before, albeit now with a Trump 2.0 sort of record of achievement to point at. He kind of did his part, but they were the ones who really made the news.
I think the thing that's most interesting about Trump 2.0 and the campaign aspect of this is the kind of speech Donald Trump 1.0 wanted to give. But the aides that were around him, the people that were kind of like those Reagan Republicans, the Bush Republicans, always told him to, like, no, this is an institution and we have to, there are ways that we do these kinds of things. The seatbelts are off and they're driving down at 100 miles per hour is what we ended up seeing. And I think, the rally speech, we've never seen a president give that kind of speech as a joint address to Congress in a State of the Union. But it shows you just like everything is different. I don't think we've seen chants of USA on the House floor during one of these speeches, right? All of those things were different. And it's a good reminder for everyone that Trump 2.0 is going to look very, very different, even in the kind of like the theatrics of it.
Rachel, what jumped out for you as like the strongest part of a Trump speech?
The strongest part. I mean, clearly he had a lot that he could brag about in terms of checking off his to-do list, right? And, you know, a lot of times presidents use these speeches to talk about things they want to do in the future. They ask Congress to pass bills, send me such and such legislation that I can sign. Well, for the most part, this speech was him running through all the executive orders that he has signed, you know, bragging that he's had the best first month of a presidency out of any president besides George Washington. As you said, clearly very Donald Trump.
No, he beat George Washington. He put himself in front. Yeah,
that's right. George Washington was second. Pardon
but
me.
He didn't say who did that study, but he said it was done by someone. I'm not sure about that study, so I would love to see who did it.
But let me just say, in terms of best and worst things for him in the speech, I thought what he did really well was something I thought he did well in his final State of the Union way back in 2020, which is he really leaned into this sort of showman mentality that he has. I mean, he brought out the theater totally. I mean, this notion of giving this young boy who had brain cancer, DJ Daniels, he just wants to be a cop. He was given only a few months to live, has been living for a few years past that, awarding him with this sort of honorary Secret Service badge. I mean, this is very quintessential Donald Trump, but it is something that people are going to watch that and their hearts are just going to freaking melt. I mean,
it was impossible not to feel it, right? When you were watching it, like even the most cynical Washington viewer, right, would have felt it.
Absolutely. This notion of bringing in a mother whose daughter was murdered by undocumented immigrants. She loved animals, so he signed an order naming this sort of sanctuary by her house after her daughter. These are things that Donald Trump does really well. I thought he should have done them earlier in the speech because a lot of Americans probably turned off after 45 minutes to an hour, and this was toward the latter half. But in terms of things that were obviously problematic in the speech, Eugene, you just mentioned a few tariffs and how that will impact farmers. Elon Musk claiming he's running Doge. One that stuck out to me was how little time he spent on prices. He basically suggested that by cutting a bunch of agencies and laying off a bunch of federal workers that they're going to get the economy, you know, back on track and people are going to feel it and inflation is going to go away. But he didn't say how, and that is not gonna fix things, let's be honest. So I think that he also made a promise that he's gonna come to regret, and that is this notion that tariffs are gonna bring in trillions of dollars to the United States to sort of reduce the deficit and the debt. I mean, most economists will tell you that that is absolutely not the case and that it's probably gonna hurt the economy more. So I have a feeling that a year from now, after these tariffs have sort of been in place, you know, he might be eating those words and regretting them.
Yeah, and his line on tariffs, he sort of gave the slightest of nods, didn't he? He said, there'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much. Well, he'd best be right about that because he say that line will be thrown at him again and again and again if it turns out that no, it was quite a big disturbance for a lot of people. Eugene, you've watched enough of these speeches over the years. Was this one just completely different to all the rest?
Oh yeah, you can't compare this to any of them. Even the ones that Trump himself gave, right? He kind of made this joke that this is the 5th time that he's given a speech like this. None of them have looked like this. And I think that's because Donald Trump has wanted, as I said, he wanted to give this kind of speech, but folks were stopping him from doing that. But that's not what's happening anymore, right? The people around him either are true believers or they see their job as helping him and pushing him to do the things that he already says that he wants to do. It also is a completely different Republican Party, right? When he was giving those speeches in Trump 1.0, there were still a lot of Republicans who were thinking or hopeful maybe that the party would switch back to the party of Romney and McCain and Reagan, and that's just very clearly not going to happen, right? This is the Trump party, and everything you saw throughout that was clear. I mean, even at the very beginning, how long they were standing up just for, not just before he started speaking, but like every couple of sentences at the beginning, they were giving him a round of applause, right? That is something that, would not have happened in another time.
I also loved that moment when he said that the CHIPS bill that Congress passed, which, by the way, was bipartisan, a bunch of Republicans voted for it, was horrible, horrible, horrible. And all the Republicans stood up and applauded for it. I mean, it was just quintessential new Washington under Donald Trump.
Yeah,
Rachel,
pretending like they had nothing to do with the fact that
nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
no. I mean, one thing, Rachel, I thought was interesting was he did say to Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune, like, you guys got to get to work on some of these things, right? Like it wasn't like clear direction, but it was kind of in a way that presidents don't typically do. They don't usually name the leaders in Congress to do the work. But he like literally turned around. He was like, it's going to be tough. Good work. Good luck. I think he even said to Mike Johnson at one point.
Yeah, and Marco Rubio got it in the neck as well, didn't he? Rachel, as we survey the world this morning, has anything changed having heard that speech?
Has anything changed having heard that speech? Well, I mean, I think in terms of news, what he talked about with tariffs, more coming in April. He's going to sort of slap this sort of reciprocal tariff, structure on the rest of the world. I think that Republicans on the Hill are probably taking note on that and like, okay, we need to call the White House now and do an intervention, because even though they were standing and clapping, they don't like this shit. They just don't. So I'm sure that's on the top of their to-do list.
All right, we better end it there. Thanks very much for joining us at this early hour. Thanks, Rachel, and thanks, Eugene. For more of our thoughts on this and what else you need to know today, read Playbook this morning at politico.com/playbook. I'm Jack Blanchard. Thank you for listening.